What's up, everybody? It's Kevin and Sergey of the Tabletop Warlords, once again welcoming you back to the channel for another in our Antares lore series.
This episode, we're talking about the Ghar Outcast Rebels. But before you can understand the Rebels, you must first understand the story of Ghar Brood 1240.
In our first lore video revolving around the Ghar, we explained that the Ghar are clones, and they are grown in batches, raised communally, and basically bred for war as they have been for thousands and thousands of years. Batch 1240 refers to the 40th batch of clones created at the 12th Hatchery. And the 12th Hatchery is kind of important because it holds a sentimental value to the current Ghar Supreme Commander. That is the title, correct, Sergey?
Yep, Supreme Commander.
Supreme Commander, so like the top notch, who apparently at the time of this story was 600 years old, which I had no clue.
Yeah, that actually blew my mind. I did not realize Ghar were like disgusting elves.
Yeah.
He's probably very Raisin-esque at this point.
Oh yeah, he definitely looks like the Crypt Keeper. Yeah. But I guess at this venerable age, he has decided that he wanted to kind of commission a new batch of Ghar that would be intended to kind of fill in like a leadership role. And what better place to grow these guys than the hatchery to which the Supreme Commander had been born from?
Ghar geneticists are always attempting to make small tweaks to the Ghar genetic strain to overall improve Ghar's capacity to be, essentially born strategic geniuses. With this particular batch of Ghar, the geneticists had achieved a great deal of success. They were actually able to raise really, really effective battle leaders for the Ghar. However, unbeknownst to them, there were some unintended consequences to their tinkering.
It's funny to point out that they would have picked up on these weird things if normal Ghar had any sense of like empathy or ability to like look outside of themselves at like another Ghar.
Exactly.
So the weirdness completely went under the radar for like their entire youth, whatever that means to a Ghar.
With this weirdness flying under the radar, the Ghar Brood 1240 became exactly what they were intended to be, and that is incredibly successful leaders. This greatly pleased the Ghar Supreme Commander, who quickly promoted members of Batch 1240 to high positions of command. The most notable of these commanders were Fartok and Karg, both of which were given command of their own battle groups. Fartok was given control of Battle Group 9, and Karg was given control of Battle Group 10.
While the quirks of their personalities were missed early on, they started to kind of take the forefront when these commanders were given huge battle groups as they were. The Ghar serving under Fartok started to notice that the commander was substantially more reserved than a normal Ghar commander, and he took in particular care in making sure that his troops were incredibly well supplied, so they didn't have any issues as far as rations or ammunition that is apparently common in Ghar militaries. Fartok also encouraged his sub-commanders to take care in not subjugating their forces to unneeded risk, meaning that he kind of he didn't want his Ghar troops to be just thrown away for no reason. This was very different from the kind of personality traits that started to come out in Karg. First of all, and one of Sergey's favorite things about Karg is that he was known for excess. I mean, he is a very kind of greedy individual. And whereas Ghar are usually kind of gaunt and don't have the biggest appetites, Karg was actually quite corpulent.
Yeah. He's a heckin' chonker. I love that.
And it's like his official model, he has like some kind of like Jabba the Hutt pipe too, right? It's like he definitely enjoys the finer things, which is like absolutely not a Ghar thing. And this kind of, it made him almost selfish in his way of leading his troops, because he like absolutely did not care at all about sending in like waves and waves of people to be destroyed if that meant he would win. Differences aside, both commanders saw a lot of success on the battlefield, and in particular in their combats against the prosperous worlds of the Algorand's empire. Fartok is said to have been responsible destroying like a handful, like 3 or 4 worlds, and Karg the exact same way. And those bloody swaths that they cut into the western end of the Determinate ended up, really having them come to the forefront as the best leaders in all of the Ghar military, underneath the Supreme Commander, of course.
The extreme success of these two leaders against the Algorand Prosperate led the Supreme Commander to give them dominion over a 5 battle group army bent on the destruction of a very heavily armed Algorand planet called Ephra. This planet represents the Algorand's best defense against the Ghar along their border, and the key to its capture lies in its capital city, also known as Ephra, which is a very heavily defended fortification.
In true Algorand fashion, the city is a bastion for defense and is surrounded by structures the fiction refers to as sentinels, which is super cool. And they're like giant like tower pylons that are bristling with guns and that project this like insane suspensor field that actually like prevents bombardment from space. So I can only imagine like the Irakeen like shield wall.
yeah, exactly.
Movie like but the Algorand also, since they're the Algorand and they, you know, partially live underground as a natural state, have like all these like insane tunnel structures also dug underneath the fortification, so their armed forces can kind of like move around unobserved to wherever they need to defend the most on the wall. And so, needless to say, this is an incredible hurdle for these Ghar forces to be able to like, you know, defeat. The commanders Fartok and Karg, however, do come up with a plan, and it seems pretty foolproof. What they're basically going to do is Karg, leading his battle group 10, is going to sweep across the battlefield right in front of these sentinel walls and basically destroy all of the Algorand defenders that have been placed at a certain point right in front of one of these sentinels. After the defenders are swept clean, Fartok will then have the honor of the killing blow by leading his battle group 9 directly forward, right up to the sentinel where they will presumably destroy it. Unfortunately for Battle Group 9, though, on the day of the main assault, things go very differently than planned.
That's right. When Fartok goes to make his final move, he finds that the Algorand have not been slain at all. In fact, they seem to know that he was coming. A horrible ambush ensues in which Battle Group 9 is cut down, and Fartok himself is very nearly killed, but escapes. Fartok cannot believe what has happened. It makes no sense. None of this has gone according to the plans that he very carefully laid out with Karg. To add insult to injury, when Fartok retreats from the battlefield, he is immediately accused of both being a coward and a failure. Failure being the highest crime amongst the Ghar.
Fartok, being the incredibly smart leader that he is, all of a sudden realizes all these pieces falling together, and basically what he comes up with is that Karg has lied, and he knows that because they were supposed to clear out these forces and they absolutely didn't, and no warning was given to him that they had not done this. And so he realizes that Karg's greed has led him to a position where he wants everything for himself, including the position of Supreme Commander. And basically the only person standing in his way was the golden child of Fartok himself. With this realization, Fartok all of a sudden is aware that for the first time in Ghar history, the unthinkable has happened, and a Ghar has placed themselves in higher regard than the whole, making them the first Ghar traitor.
Dun dun dun!
Which is like a concept that is literally unthinkable to the Ghar. And because of this fact, when Fartok levies his accusations against Karg, the Supreme Commander and all of Ghar behind him are like, Fartok, what are you talking about? That's impossible. You're a coward. And he is sentenced to being an outcast along with his entire battle group.
In traditional Ghar fashion, the outcasted battle group is then given over to Karg for command as essentially cannon fodder to be used to just kind of clog up Ephra with Ghar corpses. Despite being essentially sent in naked to the battlefield with next to no equipment and not even rations because he's not expected to survive more than 24 hours on this battlefield, Fartok manages to use the elite soldiers of Battle Group 9 to actually win the day. They storm the Algorand position deftly and secure a victory that was completely unexpected by Karg.
Having secured this unexpected victory, Fartok now finds himself in a weird position, although it is advantageous. He is expected to have died during this murderous charge, but he did not, and it's because he has such elite soldiers from this Battle Group 9. The unfortunate truth is, though, is that they have no equipment at this point, and if they were to be forced to continue the assault in true Ghar fashion, they would be absolutely slaughtered. And this is where Fartok's kind of interesting personality traits come in. He does not want to see his troops thrown away for no good reason. And in a really weird turn of events, he orders them to pick up the alien weaponry of the humans that lie dead around them.
This is not a perfect situation for Fartok because it is like one of the most sacred taboos of the Ghar, if Ghar hold anything sacred, to not use non-Ghar weaponry. So a lot of his soldiers are like, no, I'm gonna pick up this brick and I'm gonna brain some Algarin, and that's all I'm doing.
It's even funny too because he talks about how since they didn't get rations, they're forced to eat human food. So I can just imagine
and they're like
Ghar,
so furious about it.
They're like eating hamburgers and weeping. They're they're like, where's my nutrient paste Krispies? But anyways, but like Sergey said, his more loyal troops are like, you know what? I respect Fartok as a leader. I think that he's got the right idea, and they pick up the mag guns and whatnot, and kind of are like, well, what do we do next? And what Fartok has them do next is even weirder. He orders them to hide amongst the rubble and allow the advancing next battle group that was just like right after their charge to proceed over the battlefield and continue on. Once this battle group has passed their position, Fartok then orders his forces to exit their hiding places and scour the battlefield for any Ghar equipment that they might be able to utilize.
This is the birth of the Ghar Rebel outcasts. They scour the battlefield for what vehicles and battle suits they can scavenge, and they kind of equip themselves as if they were a battle group, however, no longer under the thumb of the Supreme Commander.
Fartok, having re-equipped Battle Group 9, then leads a charge against the landing craft that Ghar were utilizing for this invasion of Ephra, and basically escapes off-world to come back and fight Karg on a different battlefield.
This rebellion is not okay with the Ghar Empire, and not even like just not okay. They don't understand it.
Yeah,
they don't respect
what is going on?
They're super confused by it, and that kind of gives Fartok a little bit of time because they don't actually know how to react to what he's done.
Well, it says like they're so flabbergasted that they almost like don't react to it.
Yeah, they just like ignore him for a little while and kind of allow him to muster his forces until they finally send out a battle group to hunt him down.
This does not go well because Fartok is such an amazing commander that he actually defeats the battle group that the Supreme Commander sends to destroy him. And in that defeat, his ranks are swelled by more outcast slaves that he has basically freed and brought on, and they steal every last bit of equipment that they can get their hands on from this destroyed battle group.
Exactly. It's like every time they win a battle, they just grow in number. They're not losing soldiers, they're gaining them.
And this continues to happen. I think it says three different times.
I think four more times.
Yeah, they basically keep sending in battle groups with the express, order to destroy Fartok. But the problem is that he is the best commander the Ghar have ever seen, and he continues to defeat them.
His favorite tactic in these conflicts is kind of like a hit and run type scenario. He will isolate a Ghar ship, attack it, strip it of everything that's useful on it, free all of the slaves and bring them under his wing, and then sprint off into space.
So established are his forces that it is even thought that Fartok has basically created bases on several planets at this point.
Exactly. His number swells to the point where it's actually described as his army is a horde.
Yeah. Well, and it's so large now that Fartok has actually subdivided it into smaller battle groups that are now commanded by his most trusted sub-commanders in Battle Group 9. And that is basically the story of Fartok's rebellion and kind of the 40th batch of Hatchery 12 in general. It sets the stage for this really cool conflict where the Ghar are not only in their constant crusade against all humanity, they're also kind of having an infight based on their, emergent personalities of these weird genetic mutations in their leadership caste.
And it's something I love a lot about Rick Priestley's writing in specific, and he's done it in a lot of different games that he's worked on. But he does a really good job of setting up players with the ability to make their own battle groups in a cool, personal way. Like you can design your own member of Batch 1240, and he can have weird quirks and like be some sort of like crazy Gar who is un-Gar-like in whatever way you think is cool, to kind of make your own faction. And I think that's really awesome. I love that story.
Well, and it's really cool too, because not only is there that aspect even has a duality, because a player can make their own member of Batch 1240 who is still on loyal
part
to
of
the
the
original
Empire.
Gar Empire, or it can be one of Fartoks, like crazy, because it's like, who's to say he doesn't have members of that same batch underneath his command. And so it does give you a lot of modeling opportunities and just story, like fluff wise. Now the Ghar Rebel faction itself, whereas the story we just explained, they really do capture a lot of equipment from their own people as far as Ghar battle suits and vehicles and whatnot. But it is important to note that in that moment where Fartok ordered his men to like pick up the human defenders' weapons, that does kind of get painted throughout the entire force. The outcasts they do play a prevalent role, and a lot of them still are armed with like the basic ballistic lugger guns, but the core of the rebel army is said to be made up of Fartok's like personal warriors that are veterans from Battle Group 9, and they're called the Blackguard. And they're super cool because they have armored suits that they wear that kind of helps protect them, because the Ghar hate sunlight and all that stuff. So it's like they're not very good at being like infantry warriors.
There's not a lot of bronze to Ghar.
Yeah, no, exactly. They're very, very, very. They turn into lava. We should totally paint that like sunburned Ghar.
Yeah.
They're all lobsters. They got like they only pale where their sunglasses were. But anyways,
we need some fan art of like a Ghar on a beach with like SPF like 100 on his face.
This is awful. But anyway, but they're armed with mag guns and plasma guns and micro X launchers and all these weapons that are very un-Ghar. And then in the background they're supported by vehicles that like Fartok has had like kind of like welded together, like different, because it's like Algren
like
skimmers
vehicles,
like they just attach like spider legs to basically other panhuman technology and just like send it in, and then attach heavier weapons like mag cannons and like their own weird like amalgamations. I can't remember what they're called, but they're like, it's like basically a bunch of mag repeaters that have been welded together, and they're like
exactly.
crazy Gatling
it's
gun.
like if somebody like just tied a bunch of Uzis together with a string.
Exactly, yeah. And so it gives their army a incredibly weird flavor, because I think it definitely it represents the most diversity of different weapons, because in the Blackguard units themselves, they can even have
almost every
lances.
weapon.
I was about to say, literally, the sans all the pistols, they literally have like everything. So it's pretty cool.
And just like it said in the fluff, they are very much a horde army. They have like millions of people on the battlefield. If you want to like play the swarms of dudes with guns, this is absolutely the army for you.
The last thing I want to point out that is super cool about the Rebels faction in general too is the story we've just explained, because it's still such a very Ghar story, because it's important to know that, as far as how the Rebels are treated in the wider universe, there's like literally no distinction between them and
nobody's gonna be like, oh, he's cool, he's a rebel.
Like it isn't like you're like like bumping elbows, like they're not helping any of they still absolutely detest humans, and it's because Fartok doesn't think of himself as an un-Ghar Ghar. He thinks of himself as like, I am the truest Ghar.
Yeah.
Because he loves his Ghar comrades and keeps them alive, and still detests humans. And what he detests more than anything right now is the fact that Karg, who is the most un-Ghar Ghar, who has a sense of self and who has put that sense of self before the greater empire, labeling himself as like the first true Ghar traitor. So the arc is that Fartok is just simply trying to, he's not really a rebel against the Ghar empire.
No.
He's trying to come back and save the Ghar empire from what he thinks and labels as the most un-Ghar.
He's a Ghar empire whistleblower.
Exactly, exactly. But it's really cool, and it makes the faction and very interesting. And that's basically everything about the Ghar as far as the Rebels. We found this information across several books. Some of the information on Fartok is in the original book. A lot of it is in the Zillos expansion book. And some of it you can find in articles on the Nexus, which is really cool.
But enough about our opinions of the Ghar Rebels. We want to know what you think about the Ghar Rebel Outcast in the comments below. And if you like this video, go ahead and give it a like. And if you want to see more videos from the Tabletop Warlords, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We would love to have you.
And if you want to help support us in creating this content for you all to enjoy, the first step you could do is take a look at the spring link below in the description and get some TTW swag.
But the best way to support us is by joining our Patreon community, where any pledge amount will gain access to our Patreon exclusive development vlog.
As always, it is so fun producing these lore videos for you guys. We're so happy you're enjoying them thus far, and keep an eye out for the next one coming down the pike real fast. And as always, we will see you
On the tabletop.